Good morning, everyone. I'm going to make a start while you're getting to your seats. I'm Niki Chambers. I'm a project manager with the Small Pools Solutions Centre at the OGTC. And I'm going to give you just a quick overview on the facilities of the future piece. Now, this is very complementary to Tieback of the Future and comes about, again, from the 30th round technology event that we had back in August when we looked at clusters. So we're taking it a step further here. What we have thought about is that this is not as mature as the Tieback of the Future. It's something that we're starting to work on now. But you can see from this slide here, from Sharp Cloud here, just how many of our key themes this actually ties into. So it's very similar in terms of tiebacks. There's a lot of the themes that we're working there, a lot of the proposals and the projects will also feed into this. But there are some very unique challenges that come with the facility of the future. So I will start here. I'll press the right button this time, Charlie. So in terms of the small pool strategy, this is something that's fairly hot off the press. It's been developed this week. Now you can see there's 5 main themes here. This is really what we're working on at the moment, and you can see below some of the areas that we've actually already spoken about in terms of the circular economy, and we'll talk about remote operations and automation. But in terms of facility of the future, it really speaks to most of these areas. The only one really is probably subsurface, but it touches on all of these. So facility of the future, as I said, it ties in quite well with the tiebacks, the energy integration and the hydrocarbon processing. In terms of why it's needed, subsea tiebacks do have limitations. It doesn't fit all solutions. There's plenty of host constraints. It might be through separation, it might be through produced water handling, it could be power, it could be chemicals. We have this loss of infrastructure. It might be remote location. It could be looking at clusters. So we actually have to find another solution that will look at this. So we're looking at lower cost, smaller facilities. Our standard facilities aren't going to meet this challenge. We're looking at a short field life, which means that anything that we look at in terms of facility has to be transferable. It might be that if we're particularly looking at a cluster, it might move from one field to the next as the life of the field comes to an end. One of the key areas is it's not just about CapEx. We've obviously got to reduce the capital cost of these facilities, but we actually have to look at reducing the OPEX as well. And a lot of the themes that feed into this are about actually reducing the OPEX. And we need some industry alignment. There's quite a lot going on at the moment that feeds into this facility of the future, and people are starting to look at it. But we need to make sure that everyone's on the same page. So a lot of this technology actually exists. There's a lot being looked at for production buoys. We're working with quite a number of different companies looking at production buoys, compact FPSOs. Newies are something that have been used certainly in shallow water and in gas fields. There's plenty of examples of where this type of facility has been used. Remote operations and automation is a key theme at the moment. It's something that a lot of companies are looking at. There's a lot of operators already going with this and have onshore control rooms, and it's going to become something that becomes more and more prevalent. You'll hear an example of this from Premier later on, and how they're looking at this side of things. Because of remote operations, it reduces the offshore manning, so that's a real key thing here, and will actually reduce some of the OPEX issues. So compact processing and utilities, this is going to be a key element to actually making these facilities of the future work. There's plenty of technologies that are there and looking at in small areas, but it's about bringing all of this together. And in terms of industry alignment, hopefully this is where we can help. You're going to hear now from Crondall about the project that we're trying to put forward and get industry buy-in to this, that looks at all of these different areas and bringing these existing technologies together, but how we can actually move that forward into looking at the facility of the future. So that was just my quick introduction. What I'd like to do is introduce you to David Steed from Crondall Energy, who is actually going to talk about the facility of the future and the project with the OGTC.
Thanks, Niki. Yes, David Steed, a project manager with Crondall Energy. I've got 8 slides to take you through a whistle-stop tour of the activities we want to get into with the Facility of the Future study, which is within the Facility of the Future part of the small pools. I think we maybe should have named that slightly differently, I'm not entirely sure. Okay, right, what are we trying to do with this study? The whole goal of this study is to widen the application of normally unmanned installations, NUIs. Why a NUI? Why are we interested in NUIs? Well, fundamentally, our view and the view that we've been discussing for the last 12 months with the OGTC is that we really need to attack the OPEX of these sort of facilities, and pretty much the best way of doing that is to remove people from the facilities. So we've developed a scope that really tries to stretch, to develop a design concept integrating existing technologies with a view to stretch what a NUI can do. And we've picked three key target areas that we want to stretch the capability. First one is in terms of the processing capabilities. The majority of NUIs in the world at the moment, operating at the moment, are simple gas platforms. There are a couple of examples where we're processing oil as well, but the majority are gas platforms. We want to develop a design concept integrating current technologies that processes oil, gas and water with a focus on a small pool. And if we can demonstrate that to industry, then we take a step change in terms of what people believe that a NUI can do in the future. On top of that, we're looking to put power generation on a NUI. So we're looking to remotely control and monitor power gen on a NUI, which is different from the majority of NUIs, which import their power. You know, it's a key issue. If we can't import power at the moment, we can't put a NUI in a remote location. So this is a key enabler to be able to use these facilities elsewhere. And the next one is in terms of water depth. There are no floating NUIs in the world at the moment. So we need to expand the application, stretch the envelope and say, right, can we do this on a floating facility? Because if we can, then we can move from up to 150 meters to, well, the rest of the ocean. So 150 to 2,000 meters. So let's try and demonstrate that we can do this on a floating facility. Okay, so the Facility of the Future study will be based around a case study. We've developed a basis of design internally and with our sponsors and with the Oil and Gas Technology Centre, which is similar to what we'd expect on a small pool. So relatively low throughputs in a deep water in the northern North Sea. So we're trying to identify a realistic case study that means that when we get to the end of the study, we can say to our sponsors, look, if you've got small pools anywhere in the northern North Sea or around the North Sea, look, we've sort of demonstrated that we can, what the economics look like to do this with a NUI, and that we've demonstrated that it can be technically feasible. It's not based on a real field. You know, we've got to be realistic about that, but we're trying to make it as realistic as possible. And we're going to be applying these normally unmanned facilities to a floating facility, to an existing concept design of a production buoy that was developed by Crondall. So in order to demonstrate to you, the wider industry, that this is going to be a viable development solution in the future, that we can stretch the envelope of what a NUI can do in processing capabilities, in terms of water depth and in terms of organic power generation, really there are two arguments we need to get across. Number one is to demonstrate the performance. What's the production performance of the design that we come up with? So as long as we can demonstrate that we can produce the fluids and we can operate as a NUI, that's pretty much achieved that aspect. But, and I think the WoodMac piece is really important here, is the economic argument that gets the small pools over the line. There's no point in having a piece of technology that doesn't overcome the economic challenges of these small pools. So there, obviously, the output, we need to look at what it's going to cost to deliver, what it's going to cost to run. In terms of the engineering that we're going to complete during this study, the focus is pretty much entirely on OpEx. And I'll try and sort of explain some of the key areas and activities that we're trying to do at a really high level. So the reason we're attacking OpEx is, frankly, it's where the biggest prize is, we think, in terms of challenging the economics of these fields. In terms of floating facilities at the moment, the best opportunity to attack OpEx is to remove people from the facility. And we've identified 4 themes, which you can see on this slide, that really sort of are the areas where we think we can start removing people from the facility. So starting with the top right, designing for remote control and remote monitoring. So what does that mean? Well, as we go through the facilities design and the equipment selection piece for this, against this case study, we're going to be asked to select equipment for this facility. And priority number 1 should be, for a remotely operated facility, every single piece of equipment has to be capable of being remotely operated. It's not rocket science, is it? We need to do that. And every single instrument on board has to be capable, digitally enabled, for remote monitoring. It's an equipment selection question. So it needs to be functionally able to do what we need to do in terms of processing the fluids, but we also need that digital enablement. So there's a focus in this study of doing the facilities design with a focus on the key number 1 point is everything on board has to fit within the architecture of remote control and monitoring. Okay, well, let's assume that we've managed to achieve that. What's the next priority? Well, the next thing is we've removed all the people controlling and monitoring the facility from the facility, but the next real kick is the maintenance aspect. We need to understand how many hours we're going to spend offshore maintaining this facility. And we need to minimize that as far as possible. If we want to minimize OpEx, we need to minimize time offshore, we need to minimize maintenance man hours. Okay, so what are the key aspects that we're going to be looking at there? And what I'm trying to look at here is how will we prioritize design and equipment selection decisions? Priority 1, remote control and remote monitoring. Priority 2, high reliability equipment. Plug and play maintenance. Prioritizing the ability to get out and do maintenance quickly when we are maintaining the facility. Laying out the facility so that we can actually access equipment that's going to fail and replace key pieces of equipment as quickly as possible. So these are the themes that we're going to be looking at in this study. Other aspects that we want to look at, minimizing the maintenance cost. Yeah, another key aspect. We've minimized the amount of time that we spend there, but actually if we use walk-to-work vessels instead of helicopters to get our personnel offshore, can we liquidate more man-hours in a shorter amount of time? And if we can do that, we'll have a higher uptime. The economics of the field will look better. So we want to look into what are the benefits that we get from walk-to-work vessels? What are the limitations as well? How can we use condition-based monitoring on critical equipment to ensure that instead of having unplanned maintenance periods when equipment fails, we actually we identify when a piece of equipment is degrading and we preemptively repair it during a planned maintenance period. If we can reduce down the number of unplanned maintenance periods, we improve the uptime, minimize the cost of maintenance. So these are themes we're looking at in the study. And the top left one may be a little bit sort of obvious, but we don't really want anyone doing fabric maintenance during the design life of this facility. What that really means is, once again, equipment and bulk material selection decisions. So priorities, number 1, remote control. Number 2, maintenance time. Number 3, maintenance cost. Number 4, fabric maintenance. The interesting thing there is that if I've got 2 pieces of equipment that both meet the functional requirements for my facilities, they can both be remotely controlled and remotely monitored. They both have equivalent maintenance burdens on the facility, and they both meet our fabric maintenance decision. At that point in time, we could make a decision based on cost. But the philosophy we want to put forwards in this study, and we want to demonstrate what performance can we achieve in terms of OPEX and CAPEX, which will come out at the end of it, if we start designing our facilities to minimise the OPEX rather than minimising the CAPEX. Yeah? And that's the real sort of theme of what this study is trying to achieve. Okay. We're going to execute this study in 2 phases. Phase 1, which is approximately sort of half the time, really what we're trying to do is demonstrate that a facility that can achieve this case study, the BOD, can be operated on a normally unmanned basis. So what we're going to start this phase engaging with our sponsors. We've got a number of operators and also industry partners. We're going to really be asking for them for two sort of key aspects of NUIs. Number one is, what's their experience with NUIs in the past? So how have they designed them? How have they delivered them? How have they operated them? Let's learn from the experience they've got already. And the other is, in the future, the facility of the future, how do operators want to operate this in the future? I don't want to get to the end of a study and provide a concept where oil companies look at it and go, yeah, well, we'd never operate like that. So we want to get the reality piece from the end user. And in terms of the vendors, trying to understand, we've got some key vendors on board, trying to understand what their technology can actually do and what they can bring to the party, and get them thinking about really what the limits of what they can achieve are. So in phase 1, it's a preliminary facilities design exercise with a lot of engagement with the vendors and really focusing on equipment selection decisions around those 4 themes that we identified in the previous slide. So really focusing on minimizing the OPEX, with the output of proving that we're an unmanned facility by the end of that phase. In phase 2, what we're trying to do is really demonstrate the economic side of it. So mature, refine the design further, and work up the CAPEX and OPEX estimates so that we can turn to the industry and say, right, we've proven we can operate this remotely. We can proven that it can be maintained on a normally unmanned basis. And look, we've demonstrated what the economics look like. And then we think we'll start getting to the stage where we've got a credible solution that people can look at Wood-Mac small pools and go, there might be something in there. Maybe we can actually start using this technology. Okay, so what study outcomes? Technical proof of concept up front. A couple of points there is we've tried to stretch the envelope of NUIs in 3 directions: power generation, water depth, and expanding the processing capabilities. That proof of concept could be for all 3 of those in one package, or each individually. So we want to be able to say, if someone wants to expand the capability of a NUI on a fixed platform in the southern North Sea, this study should provide the confidence that they can do so. We're not focusing on a floating unmanned platform in the northern North Sea processing oil, gas and water. If they want organic power generation, this study should also provide that confidence as well. So we're trying to split out those 3 areas that we're stretching it, rather than focusing on the technology outcome. There's a lot of learning on each of the individual themes. We want to define the economic feasibility. We want to be able to say where we are in terms of the small pools and the different developments that this sort of concept could take forwards. In terms of this concept here, we want to be able to say, look, if an operator comes to us, we can start taking things forwards. This is a credible development solution going forwards. And possibly, for me, one of the most important things is defining what the design, operating and maintenance philosophies are that we need to use to deliver successful, normally unmanned installations in the future. Because I think in terms of, for instance, making equipment selection and design decisions based on OPEX rather than CAPEX, it is a fundamental shift in how we procure the offshore facilities. And one of the things I really want to be able to share with everyone is, right, this is what we've learned in doing this, and this is how we think we should go forwards in the future. One last slide. In conclusion, we've been working with the OGTC on this for about 9 months, I think. We've all come a long way in how we think around this study and the sort of concepts that we're looking at. We're going to kick off the study next month. We've got 4 partners confirmed. Premier Oil, who are going to be speaking next, are one of our sponsors, and they're, hopefully you don't give away all the lessons learned in one go. But yeah, if this is of any interest to anyone, we'd happily talk to people about getting more people on board. Niki's last slide, she said collaboration, I think was the very last bullet. This is a study that benefits from collaboration. It benefits from getting people on board and thinking about how to do things slightly differently. Thank you very much.
Thanks, David. Right, I'm going to go a bit wild here. Where is it? There, down the bottom. So it ties into our facility of the future, but this is about offshore renewables, and I am going to invite Martyn Tulloch to come up and present his slides, and you'll see that how this ties into our theme. So thank you.
Thanks, Niki. Good afternoon. 15 minutes is not very long, so let's get cracking here. We're going to start in 1873. If I can get this thing going. One click.
No, I have to click that one first.
Oh, then
and
we're
then
away.
it goes.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to start again in 1873, the year that Professor James Blythe built the world's first wind turbine that produced electrical power. Professor Blythe taught at Anderson's College in Glasgow, now part of the University of Strathclyde. And he built this at his holiday home in Merrykirk, 40 miles southwest of here. Now, what I love about this photo is the spirit it conveys. This is back in the sort of middle of the Victorian era. Over in the States, you've got Edison and Tesla making great innovations. And here in northeast Scotland, we've got the world's first wind turbine. Now fast forward 130 years and we've got the Highland Scotland project. 40 miles northeast of here, it's a slightly bigger scale than Professor Blythe's turbine. Slightly lower local content, but still quite an important step in the offshore wind power journey. Now this slide gives you a feel for the scale of offshore wind turbines. You can see the 747 there as a comparison. The first offshore wind turbine was installed in Denmark in '91, but it wasn't really until the early 2000s that the offshore wind industry took off. And in the last 15 years, it's gone from pretty much zero to just over 15 gigawatts of installed capacity. The graph on the bottom right there is from a Douglas Westwood projection, and they reckon that over the next decade, offshore wind power installed capacity is going to increase 6-fold. The map here shows you where the UK's offshore wind farms are located. You can see a cluster in sort of east of the Thames estuary, a cluster off Hull, a cluster off Liverpool in the Irish Sea. The vast majority of these are fixed installations. Again, the vast majority are within 12 miles of the coast. If you actually look at where the offshore wind resource lies, the central and northern North Sea have about 30 to 50% greater wind resource than these nearshore areas. Now the problem if you're a utility looking to produce power to the grid is that you've got increased capex costs, you've got increased cabling costs, increased operational costs, and these all combine to make these areas not of interest at the moment. But if you're looking at providing power to an offshore gas installation, well, the economics are considerably different. This slide here gives a feel for offshore technology. It's just helping to set the scene. Over on the left there, fixed monopiles are suitable for water depths up to about 30 metres. So if you're looking at integrating oil and gas and offshore wind, the southern North Sea is the obvious basin in the UK sector, certainly. Chakras and tripods can be used up to about 50 metres, so there's maybe a slight bit of overlap in the inner Moray Firth. But realistically, for most of our Romanian offshore resources, floating wind is the only solution that's going to have any overlap. There's 3 main types of technology under development in terms of the foundation: TLPs, semi-subs and spars, and we'll touch on a few of these in the next 10 minutes. This graph here, taken from a Statoil presentation given at All Energy in 2016, gives their feel for how the floating offshore wind sector will develop. It's going to be the early 2020s before we see any real movement, and they believe the main initial markets will be Japan and the US. Moving on to take a quick look at the economics of offshore wind. We're using official figures from an ARUP report commissioned by the UK government here. The benchmark is always combined cycle gas turbine technology. At the moment, you can produce onshore gas power for about 60 quid per megawatt hour. That's predicted to increase to about 100 by 2030. Onshore wind is roughly at par with combined cycle gas turbine technology at the moment. Offshore wind sits at about £115 per megawatt hour, and it's predicted to decrease to just under 100 by 2030. Now, something that cropped up in the last CFD auction was we had a number of very low bids for fixed offshore wind farms in the UK. That's represented by the shaded area there. I think it's fair to say that there's some debate within industry as to how realistic these bids are. Finally, floating wind today sits at about £200 to £300 per megawatt hour. You can see that the projected cost reduction trajectory there. There's also a couple of potentially game-changing technologies under development. If you talk to the people developing two-blade downwind turbines, they reckon they can get the cost down to about £70 per megawatt hour in the next decade. So what we show here is 2B Energy's two-blade turbine. Scottish Enterprise is actually quite a significant investor in this firm. There's plans for a demonstration array in the Firth of Forth. We've also got over in Norway, Seawind Technologies two-blade turbine. The first demonstration turbine will be installed in the gravity base later this year, and there's also plans for that to be rolled out in a floating foundation. In Germany, we've got Aerodyne looking at a 15 megawatt two-turbine unit, again on a floater. And we mustn't forget the kites. There's a number of companies looking at developing kite power technology. One of the foremost of these is based in Ayrshire, Kite Power Systems. And back in 2016, they secured a £5 million investment round from Schlumberger, Eon and Shell. So we've got two quite significant oil companies taking an interest in this company. Moving on to look at potential integration with oil and gas operations. This slide really just gives a feel for the sort of mindset that I believe is required. In Statoil, they've done a lot of work looking at subsea compression. They use that in the Asgard field today. They're also looking at deploying an unmanned, remotely operated wellhead platform, something that's quite novel in Norway, but commonplace over here and indeed in other international basins. But beyond that, they're looking at rolling out that concept to having a completely unmanned production platform tied back to a host, and ultimately to having a completely standalone production platform, potentially in the far north. So one obvious application, if you're looking at integrating renewables with oil and gas, is looking at tying gas power into wind power. And then this diagram here comes from a company, a young startup, Indigo Power. They're led by Rob Hastings, who until 2016 led the Crown Estate's energy division. And before that, he was in charge of Shell's offshore wind team. There's actually quite a compelling business case to this, because if you look at offshore wind infrastructure, it typically operates at less than 50% capacity just due to the intermittent nature of wind. So if you've got a small stranded gas field, why not convert that to power offshore, tie it into the electricity grid, rather than attempting to tie quite often a high-power gas source into a low-power infrastructure system. Another obvious application is to use offshore wind to power topsides kit. DNV spotted the opportunity here, and you're probably aware of the Win-Win project that they're developing. It's basically looking at a high wind spar as a water injection tool. So apologies, the slide on the bottom right is quite fuzzy here, but that's their artist's impression of what this could look like. So you can see an HPU chemical injection kit and the pumps all powered by a 5 megawatt wind turbine. Now, the economics for this, you've obviously got increased operational cost, but they believe that the reduction in capital expenditure in brownfields mods, tied in with removing the need for a line, an actual water injection line and the control cables, can make this advantageous over about 25 to 30 kilometres. So if you're close to an existing platform, it doesn't have the same compelling economics as it does at distance. But the interesting thing to me is if you look at the Highland spar, it's not the most obvious technology for hosting topsides kit. There are at least 28 floating foundations under development across the globe at the moment. Of these, only 3 of them are spars, and over half of them are semi-subs. So this slide here gives a snapshot of some of the foremost semi-subs. On the top left, we've got Principal Power's wind float device. Now, the photo I've included there was a 2 megawatt demonstration turbine that was deployed off Portugal in 2011. It operated for 5 years with no significant downtime. In the middle, we've got Gusto MSC's semi-sub concept. Now, Gusto is a company with a strong oil and gas pedigree. Top right, we've got Mitsui's 3-column semi-sub, and underneath that, you've got Mitsubishi's. Both these have been deployed in open water quite successfully off Japan. Bottom middle, we have the Olaf Olsen concrete semi-sub concept. Olaf Olsen's another company with a strong track record in oil and gas. They were involved in pretty much all the concrete gravity-based foundations that have ever been built. And finally, bottom left, we've got the Nautilus concept from Spain. It's actually quite interesting to take a look at the one top left, especially given an announcement that was made earlier this week. I don't know if you noticed, but on Wednesday, Aker Solutions announced they'd taken a 10% stake in Principal Power this year, with the option to increase that in the future. Now, one of the things that they stated in their announcement was that one of the principal drivers for them was to look at using this technology in a wider range of markets. So if you look at the background to wind float, it actually started as a marginal field solution. Back in the early 2000s in Houston, 2 naval architects got together. One worked for Shell, one worked for Exxon, and they came up with this concept, mini float. So you can see it positioned here as a potential chemical injection solution, potential separation solution, water injection and power chain. And it doesn't really take a big leap to envisage adding storage to something like this, like the IMF P300 design from the mid-80s. You could then have a solution that could host a wind turbine, potentially could tap into a small pool. If you look at the economics, floating offshore wind today, I said it's maybe about £200 to £300 per megawatt hour. If you've already got the substructure there, and all you're doing is adding the turbine part, and you can perhaps share the operational cost with your oil and gas ops, then you could make a huge difference, especially in a field, for example, let's say you're importing diesel. If you're importing diesel in the North Sea and producing power from that, you're typically costing 150 to 170 quid per megawatt hour. So if you could reduce that to maybe 50 or 60 pounds using wind, in a typical 10 million barrel small pool, you could save $1 to $2 per barrel in operational costs. So again, it's just a concept, this is just an idea, but it's going to be very interesting to see where Aker decide to take this. So I do the 15 minutes. I hope I've provided some food for thought. I'm certainly looking forward to some questions immediately after this and at lunchtime as well. And if you want to get in touch with me by email or phone, the details are there. And I believe the presentation will be available on the web at some point. Thank you.